Who doesn't remember the opening narration for The Adventures of Superman? Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Yes, it's Superman, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. This intro brought smiles and anticipation to any of the kids from the 50s and 60s that were hooked on this series, myself included. It was the first television series to feature Superman, and the show began filming in 1951 in Southern California at the RKO studios and sound stages, and also their backlot called 40 Acres. Clark Kent and Superman were played by George Reeves, with Jack Larson playing Jimmy Olsen, John Hamilton as Perry White, with Phyllis Coates playing Lois Lane in the first season, and Noel Neill stepping into the role in the later seasons. Superman has a constant battle of trying to rid the town of Metropolis of crooks, gangsters, and other villains. While he's off duty from his role as Superman, he works for the Daily Planet as a reporter named Clark Kent. His colleagues there, Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, are constantly finding themselves in dangerous situations that only Superman is able to intervene and solve the problem. The TV series is actually based on the B-movie project called Superman and the Mole Men, which is a 58-minute black and white movie that starred George Reeves and Phyllis Coates. It was done in November of 1951. This film was chopped in half and repurposed as a two-parter in season 1 in the TV series. The title of those 2 episodes was called The Unknown People. Now, this TV series is terribly low budget. It almost has the characteristics in the first season of being done in somebody's backyard. But we still loved it. It didn't matter how corny it was back then or how corny it seems today. It's still a blast to watch. In the early seasons, wire work was used to create some of the flying scenes. During the course of all this, there were some minor mishaps that happened. But on one occasion, the support wire snapped, causing George Reeves to be dropped to the floor. From that point on, he refused to do any more wire work. There was some done when they used stunt doubles for him, but he himself would never do it again. And it's pretty obvious the difference and the change from using wire work to other sleight of hand, in that in the early episodes, you can see Superman taking off in flight within the frame. But in later seasons, he would run towards the camera, hit a springboard hidden below frame, and leap out of the frame. The first 2 seasons were filmed in black and white, and then all the seasons after that were filmed in color, even though they were shown in black and white on television. During those first 2 seasons, George Reeves' suit was a totally different color. He wore brown for red and gray for blue and white for yellow in his costume. This was because these colors filmed better in black and white. When the show began to film in color in 1954, that's when he switched to the trademark red and blue suit. Because of the extremely tight budget, all the episodes were filmed completely out of sequence. All the scenes that were done in a particular office, like Perry White's office, for example, were done at one time. They would shoot multiple episodes that very same day, maybe 3 or 4 weeks worth, with completely different titles. And this is one of the reasons that you constantly see the actors wearing the same clothes in every episode. Perry White, played by John Hamilton, had real trouble remembering all his lines. He was constantly flubbing them up. Their solution was to have him sitting at his desk a lot of the time, with his desk completely littered with papers. Some of these papers would be the script that had his lines on it. That way he could glance down to be prompted for his next line. During the first season of the series, the E. Clem Wilson building in L.A. was used for the exterior shots of the Daily Planet. Throughout the rest of the series, the building seen as the Daily Planet building is really Los Angeles City Hall. The rest of the buildings that stand in for Metropolis in the street scenes were all backlot facades at the old 40 Acres backlot in Culver City. And one might remember that this is where they filmed Gone with the Wind and The Andy Griffith Show, along with numerous others like Gomer Pyle USMC and Hogan's Heroes. There's an often talked about mistake that you see in the show, and that's where Superman would duck when one of the thugs that he was chasing would throw an empty gun at him. Most of these actions are attributed to George Reeves not wanting to be hit by a prop gun, but it was actually his stunt double, Dale Van Sickle, who was doing the ducking. This mistake only happened once in the episode called The Mind Machine from 1952. Watching the fight scene closely, you can see that a stunt double is used some of the time, and that it's the double who ducks. If he can stop a bullet, why couldn't he stop the gun that shot it? The costume for Superman that George Reeves wore had some padding added to it to give it greater bulk. Reeves himself did a lot of his own stunts, though, and this required him to be pretty athletic, in that he had a lot of jumping from great heights and also hitting a springboard with sufficient force to propel him out of frame. He was constantly swinging in and out of windows, and almost all of these were done by Reeves himself. George Reeves really wanted to quit the series and did his best to get out of it after the third season. The production company tried to find a replacement for him, but were unsuccessful. You see, Reeves tried to produce his own series titled Port of Entry, but when he couldn't secure financing for it, he decided to return to Superman with an increased salary. He's the only actor in the series to appear in all 104 episodes. The merchandising for Superman products was completely off the charts in the 1950s, and the biggest seller was the costume cape. Tragically, they had a problem with this. Children were donning the capes and climbing up on top of houses and jumping off, thinking that it would make them fly. This was an absolute terrible concern to George Reeves himself. He felt responsible for these kids getting hurt, and he wanted the capes taken off the market. But there were just too many dollars involved. So the other option was to do a public service announcement reminding children that no one, but no one, can do the things that Superman does. And that goes especially for flying. George Reeves ended up dying from a gunshot wound to the head in 1959. And in a pretty macabre move, the production company did its best to get co-star Jack Larson to carry the torch for the series, titled Superman's Pal, Jimmy Olsen, which would use stock footage and lookalikes of Reeves to do the production. Luckily, Larson decided not to follow this path, and I think it's probably a good thing that he didn't listen to the studio. There are tons of guest stars that you would recognize, because this was in TV's infancy, so you had just a plethora of unknowns that were looking for any bit parts they could find in Hollywood. People like Claude Akins, John Banner, who played Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes. Hugh Beaumont plays an ex-convict, and you'll remember he went on to play Ward Cleaver in the series Leave It to Beaver. Rifleman's Chuck Connors is in it. Dabbs Greer is in it twice. Dabbs played the Reverend on Little House on the Prairie, and he's really the first person that Superman saves in episode 1. In the second season, episode 1, you'll also see him as someone who's convicted of murder and is about to be executed when Superman comes to the rescue. This is just a few of the people that you would recognize that went on to fame later on. The sudden death of the star of the show, George Reeves, brought a quick end to this series and disappointed its fans thoroughly. As terribly corny as this show is, it is still a blast to watch, even today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.